Guys are just talking. Talking la 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 like this is business as usual. It's not. You're not even looking at the problem.
What the hell kind of clown are you?
You're crying on the inside kind, I guess.
Good evening. Welcome to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast. I'm Leanne Lohman. I'm joined tonight by Zach Franciscus, Dave Ribeiro, and Bob Quinn. David Korb is with us in spirit. He's not feeling well. We hope he's back at 100% in time for New Year's. Guys, it's the middle of the holiday season. We had that terrible loss to Kansas City. Now we're kind of regrouping to play next Saturday against or upcoming Saturday, I guess at this point, for our last game of the season against the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike Tomlin did his press conference today. And so I know our show today is going to talk about some New Year's resolutions for the Steelers, but let's talk for a few minutes about that press conference and what your guys' thoughts were. He did mention a couple notable injuries. He said that both Joey Porter and Justin Fields should be cleared to return or able to play this week. I don't know whether they'll choose to use them, but it sounds like if they wanted to, they'll be able to. He also mentioned what I thought was noteworthy at a time of year where it seems like everybody's banged up and sore and hurt, that Corey Trice and Jaylen Warren were both a little banged up. He did indicate that he thought everybody would be good to go, for the Bengals game, but I thought that was interesting that he specifically mentioned those two. Guys, Zach, what was your thoughts from today's press conference?
I was actually focused on more the players themselves. So let's jump to the other two people who specifically focused on the Tomlin press conference. Then I can talk more when we get to the players.
All right.
themselves.
I thought the interesting thing was, and if you guys follow the website, I wrote an article about this afternoon. The fact that Tomlin came out so forcefully and attacked the Russell Wilson narrative with saying, no, George Pickens didn't have anything to do with that interception. It's not that Wilson necessarily said it was Pickens' fault. He kind of said, yeah, I thought he was going to go vertical, and yeah, it's on me though. But if you know Russell Wilson in his little savvy media tricks, it was kind of a, hey, I'm going to do a Ben Roethlisberger here and maybe throw my wide receiver under the bus. Didn't work out because Tomlin came out today and said, no, it had nothing to do with the interception. So maybe there's a little bit of crack there. There's a little bit of trouble in paradise with this.
Tomlin always defends his players. I mean, they almost,
Well, by defending Pickens, Liam, by defending Pickens, he attacked Wilson.
I didn't think Wilson was that adamant, you know what I mean, that he was blaming Pickens. Now, there were a lot of other people who blamed Pickens, you know what I mean? Football players who came out, Terrell Owens and a bunch of other ones that said, this is where he was supposed to be glowing. He clearly ran the wrong route. I don't know. I didn't know if Russ was just kind of deflecting,
Yeah, I don't think he ran the wrong route at all. I think it was an option route, and he broke it off sooner rather than later because McKinney was giving him the business. So he figured, hey, maybe if I turn around, I can draw a penalty. But bottom line is, and I think it was Reed who said on in reaction to Dan Orlovsky, hey, I was always coming across the middle. Pickens cutting the route had absolutely nothing to do with why I was doing, which kind of makes you wonder if he's looking and he sees three guys covering Freiermuth, why he didn't just throw back shoulder to Pickens on the sideline anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame Pickens on that one. That was just a bad decision by Russ. And you're right. Tomlin came out very strongly, which I found, I don't know, is it enabling when he defends George Pickens the way he does sometimes?
Did we just lose Dave too?
He really wants to make the point here. So
he really does. He's really focused on that. Really quick while we're waiting for the other two to get back. Is this the defending of these players? Is that anything similar to what we saw with Antonio Brown? Is it the same kind of defense? And would be worried about that, or is this Mike Tomlin doing his best to contain the same kind of thing that was going on with Antonio Brown when we didn't know how much was going on in the background? That's what I'm curious, because he's always been defensive, but it's specifically when it comes to those wide receivers, when that happens, first thing I think of is this another Antonio situation where he's doing his best to hold the dam back. And in his mind, he's like, and I'm just speculating yet again. I do not have someone on the inside, but I'm wondering if during that time, he's like, my choice right now is to answer this question directly or make sure I talk with Pickens later and it's me and him rather than airing this out with everyone else. So I'll defend him here. And it's kind of like when I was younger, my dad always told me, he's like, defend your sisters when we're public. And then if you have a problem with them, talk to them in private. He said there is a certain respect there with that. That's what I'm hoping is happening. I'm not saying it is. It's what I'm hoping is happening because of the Antonio Brown situation. Is that, what do you guys think? Is that completely wrong? Is that
I think that's a big part of it. I think.
Sorry, guys, my camera like went out on me all of a sudden. I was trying to plug in my mouse. I'm having like a computer crisis today, and then my camera goes out. It's just one of those days.
It wouldn't be close to New Year's if stuff didn't start to go strangely weird.
Yeah,
so.
Right. Exactly.
So, Leah, really quick to catch up. What I was saying is, Dave was about to mention, does this defense have anything to do with how he reacted when he was trying to hold the Antonio Brown dam back? And is this Mike Tomlin choosing to not exasperate a situation for the sake of his keeping that dam held back rather than air it out? So, Dave, what you were about to say, what do you think of that?
I think that is part of it. I think it's a big part of it. I can only imagine what it's like to try to manage George Pickens. It cannot be easy. I mean, as much as we love the kid on the field, he you could just tell some of the things he does, on the sidelines and even during, in the middle of plays. Like he to me, he seems like a ticking time bomb. Like there's a 15-yard gut wrenching penalty at some point coming. Credit to Tomlin. He did wonders with Antonio Brown and others. He kept Chase Claypool on the straight and narrow for one season anyway before he went off the reservation. He's got a knack for doing it. So more power to him.
And we saw with Antonio Brown Deontay Johnson, that apparently we got a lot more out of him than any other team had the possible ability to, or even weren't willing to try. It seems like they weren't even willing. So who knows what Mike Tomlin had to go through to get what he got out of Deontay Johnson, as minimal as it was, in my opinion.
He could write a book.
So I don't
dealing with diva wide receivers. Yeah. He could write a bestseller.
Players in general. I mean, I think he's dealt with a lot of them. That was a conversation in my house this morning about how good Mike Tomlin and the Steelers are at not only getting the most out of these guys, but man, knowing when to cut the cord and let them go. Yep. We got ridiculed for letting Le'Veon Bell go, for letting Antonio Brown go, for lots of guys, and you think about stuff like that, and he seems to have a knack, or they seem to have a knack for knowing when the right time to let it go is. Relic brought up a point. He said, I have thoughts on the press conference. I don't care if Mike T said he spoke to the team and aired things out. It's week 18. Shouldn't have to be happening at this point, but here we are. Move on, nut up, or hush. I don't disagree, but I guess if the problem really didn't rear its head, and, look, everything looks better when you're winning, right? So when you're 10-3, everything looks good. You start to lose some games and ugly bubbles to the surface. Mark Malone hopes that both Fields and Wilson are gone next year. I think that's interesting. And we're going to talk about this. I'm sure this topic is coming up from somebody during the New Year's resolutions part. But if not, we'll come back to this because I think this is interesting to part. But Mark does say that he could play better at his age. So we'll offer him to do like what that guy did for the Eagles, and he can show up and try out again or something.
For fans old enough to remember that 1984 AFC Championship game, for a half, he matched Dan Marino shot for shot. Second half, not so much.
Fair enough. Well, what else? What other thoughts did you guys have from the press conference?
I had a random thought that before we get back to the presser really quick, I thought that all three former Steeler quarterbacks did something yesterday that caught my eye, whether it was Mason Rudolph almost doing something or Kenny Pickett's physics-defying flip over himself that he did, or the amount of former Steeler quarterbacks that were out doing things yesterday, it amused me. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. All three of them threw a touchdown pass, right? Yesterday, all three of them had a touchdown pass.
Yeah.
And I think all three threw a pick, too.
I thought we wronged Kenny Pickett stuff on social media was
Yeah.
hilarious.
I mean,
because
I'm glad we're not diving into that.
apparently you get into the Hall of Fame now when you throw 143 yards and 1 touchdown pass.
Yeah,
Jeez,
they've
one
been
touchdown pass.
those Pickett stands have been waiting for that.
Yeah.
Any glimmer of hope that they could pounce
Anything
on.
to redeem that
Yeah.
horrible draft choice.
Yeah.
But Big Poppy says, good coaches don't air out the team's dirty laundry, and teammates for that matter handle it in the locker room.
Yeah,
And that's
the way it probably should be done.
100%. 100%. I've never agreed with that. I think we talked about on the show one other time, that whole idea of the fans waiting for Coach Tomlin to sell players out and complain about what they've done wrong. And I always bring up, like, well, if you got in trouble at work, would you want your boss to like put it out on Twitter and, in USA Today and tell all of your coworkers about it? I mean, that's your customers, whoever you serve. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's their job.
I think you have to look at guys who make millions of dollars in a public eye. You don't need to do it often, but it's not like Tomlin has never called a player out. He has, but
maybe there's a rare time and a place for it. But I don't think with something like this, that's the way you fix what's going on with that defense.
At this point, you got to do something, because you got the entire defense basically, in the locker room after the game, pulling Ben Roethlisberger's. Oh, this one guy, he's terrible. He's costing us. Who's the one guy? Oh, I don't want to say.
Yeah, you can't. You can't.
Yeah,
say who the guy is. That wouldn't be.
There's David says, praise in public and criticize in private. And while you can't have that, that after losses, people are emotional. Do you know what I mean? They're frustrated in the moment about something that they felt like happened or didn't happen. And then, you cool off, cooler heads prevail, and you think, I probably shouldn't have said that. Big Poppy came back and said he agrees with David. So there we go. Brings up that Pickens was caught last week via some Steelers media telling fans to quote, pull up over something on Instagram.
Yeah, I don't know the exact comment, but I do know what they're talking about. I will say this, I felt kind of old because I don't fully understand the exact language or what was going on, but I knew that it was enough to cause contention. So, but I did.
I'm sure I don't understand the insult that was used, but.
Yeah, I don't. Do you guys? And either you.
Pull up. I think it means show up if you got a problem. Me pull up.
Pull up means like let's fight.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the other stuff was. Pull up means let's fight.
Well, look at it.
We didn't bring this up at all last week. Did anybody else have a problem with George Pickens? Fraternizing with Mahomes and.
What if he'd snubbed him and everybody would have been like, "Oh, what an asshole!"
But did he run up to them while they were doing their post-game thing? I have a problem with that. I don't like that.
Oh, if it would be anybody else, I think that was maybe George Pickens' way of, whether it was controlling himself or a sport, something where I'm hoping people have been talking to him and say, George, I don't care if you believe it. I don't care if you want to be it. Show people. Do things when you're on camera. They're going to make people stop saying, oh, what a bad guy you are. And in that moment, he might be saying, oh, best thing in this moment, yet again, speculating. But a lot of people were like, oh, he was going up and saying, hey, come get me next year. I'm like, okay, we are putting words into a situation.
I don't think you were saying that.
Know what happened.
That's a little extreme, but I don't know. You just got beat.
Well, I have a problem with jersey swaps. Apparently, there were players on the field in Cleveland doing snow angels. I have problems with all of that, but I mean, it's the modern
I don't mind the
game.
jersey swaps. That doesn't bother me.
It bothers me. If you want to do it in the locker room. Okay, you want to do it in the locker room, keep it away from the fans. Sure, no problem. You're all professionals. I get that. But yeah, the whole we kiss each other before games and all that stuff. I hate that. I liked it when we were enemies. But at the same time, modern players aren't like that, so you got to get used to it.
But it's also not the NFL where teams stayed with their team forever. There's so much crossover with these guys, and
that's what it is.
Each other. Yeah. I mean, that really, I think, changes the tenure.
I think we all need to resign ourselves to one major fact: George Pickens is not re-signing in Pittsburgh. If it's not clear to you yet, it should be becoming crystal clear. I think a trade demand is coming right after the season ends. I think there's no way in hell he will sign an extension with us. He's gone. He doesn't want to be here.
Because he doesn't want to?
Yes, he doesn't want to be here. He does not want to be in Pittsburgh.
I wouldn't go that far, but I think this is going to be fascinating off season, what they do to him. Do they want to sign him?
everything with Pickens causes contention for fans. And then Relic came back with he knows what it was from Instagram. Fans posted a video about being selfish and immature. Pickens posted, you live in Pitt, just send me the Addy because you can't talk about me and don't want to actually meet me, right? Let's meet up, bro. I got some news you might want to hear / feel.
George.
Is that what was that movie? Damn, what was the movie with Patrick Swayze where he was Brody? Point Break? Is that a Point Break reference?
I will never understand how professional athletes making millions of dollars will get into fights, online with people in their basements, giving them a hard time. You must have something better to do than be on Instagram fighting
Mark
with
Madden. Get
idiots.
over it.
I'll never understand it. If I was a professional athlete, I would never look at social media.
The smartest ones like Ben Roethlisberger, you know what I mean? TJ Watt doesn't really do social media. Like, to me,
why do you care?
Just stay out of it.
Well, TJ has been shown he can be a little thin-skinned. Ben is the king of thin-skinned.
Yes.
So,
but he doesn't have a social media account that he's popping off on all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
he feels some type of way. He has somebody who does that for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben has his own little army of.
He does.
I know he does. He does.
But that being said, look, Pickens is. I think he's extremely unhappy here. I think he's been for about a year and a half. So, yeah, he's got thin skin. Yeah, the fans get to him. Yeah, this. But I mean, bottom line is, you got to feel like if I'm Pickens and I know I'm a top 10 talent wide receiver, and nobody disputes that he's a top 10 talent, may not production, and he just feels like his career's being wasted. And I get it. And some of this stuff, I think, is him just being, hey, I'm only here for 4 years. I'm a second-round draft pick. I'm out. I'm gone. It's the second he couldn't demand a trade last year. He could have, but he looked stupid. Now this year, this is another year where, he had a little bit of an injury, but he's got to look at, how am I going to get paid? I want to go somewhere else next year before I sign a contract, go catch 100 passes, 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, get with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, God forbid, somebody like that, and prove what I'm worth. He's a Georgia guy. He's a high-strung guy.
I made the exact same argument for Deontay. The exact same argument.
Yeah. And the problem, people, especially lately, Steelers receivers who leave don't have decorated careers elsewhere the way they expected to have, or hit the jackpot. I genuinely, I agree he might not be exactly happy here. I do think that there has to be a little dose of reality where there will be conversations had in the offseason where his agent or him is going to say, listen, I need to know about the direction of this team. What other wide receivers we bring in to back? There's probably going to be those kind of conversations had, but I can't. If he demands a trade right off the bat after the kind of season I think that would send a signal that would take the real teams off the table and would leave him with someone like the Raiders or the Saints and he would not perform well there. It would be a huge mistake if George Pickens did that. Huge.
Carter Benson says, does Pickens hate Pittsburgh, or does the majority of Pittsburgh hate Pickens? I tend to think.
I don't know.
You saw
Carter.
I think he's pretty popular when he's
I don't
playing. No?
I personally, I'm not in Pittsburgh, so I don't know.
I love him. I hate the fact that we might lose him.
I think there's a lot of the same old stuff that we heard about Juju, and I mean Antonio Brown, it was warranted a lot more, but all that stuff I think we hear about Pickens. You know what I mean? He has got talent, but it's always the but is but is this, but is that. And I think that, I think there's a good chunk of our fan base that needs to resign themselves to this is a little bit what some of these guys are like. It's not 1974. It's not the Lynn Swann era anymore. And I mean, maybe that's a shame and maybe it's not, but it's just the reality. Guys like Larry Fitzgerald, the guys that are kind of quiet and keep their head down, I think are fewer and far between. I think I think we built a type in the league and a lot of them live up to it. And Relic says that he thinks that the Steelers offer a small contract, and because of his attitude, Pickens doesn't sign, Steelers franchise tag him, and he pulls a bell and holds out and ends trades.
They won't go through that again. They'll trade him before that happens.
No, I
They won't
agree.
go through
They're
it
not
again.
going to go through that. I think Pickens hates the quarterback situation, the lack of willingness from Steelers historically not paying big money for wide receivers, and the way things go currently in pick. I definitely agree that he would be worried about the way they don't pay people.
Well, as far as the Steelers go, the one thing I would tell them is any decision you make on wide receiver, double check it, triple check it, look into the future, because you made a bad decision at wide receiver when you didn't have a backup plan outside of Ayuk with Deontay Johnson. Well, if you're going, if for some reason we do have to get rid of Pickens, have a solid, like get a receiver in return, or
You mean a
have
better
like
plan
a
than they had
specific guy. You're like,
this
we're
last
going to
time?
go for this guy in the draft and like circle him with this pick that we get for Pickens, because the worst thing we could do is say, oh, we'll find someone like we did this season. That's my worry on the Steelers. It's not as much on Pickens. I think the Steelers need to maybe even overpay just to stop. It's offense without Pickens. We saw what it's like. Imagine a whole season without Pickens.
Well,
That's what we're looking at if we let him go.
one thing I want to say is when I was getting ready for the show today, and I was looking at video clips for the intros, I came across one, and I almost used it, but then I was like, this doesn't really fit New Year's. But Justified, if you're fans of it, Raylan Givens, he had a little saying where if you run into an asshole in the morning, you ran into an asshole. You run into assholes all day, you're the asshole. At this point, we're going Antonio Brown, sort of Mike Wallace, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, George Pickens. It's an awful lot of wide receivers who are divas in Pittsburgh. Are we creating the culture, or is it the culture of all wide receivers? And I blame most of it on the wide receiver position. But at this point, now we're talking so many that, okay, we hate and we want to get rid of them, but we're really good at drafting them. But then nobody goes on and has a good career. What is it?
We cut
I don't
them
think
when
we're
they're
good at
done.
getting wide receivers.
I think when they've capped, we let them go. I think we're able to keep them, mostly control them, get the best out of them. They're like prize dairy cows. We milk them for what we can. And then
That's a good comp. I like that.
Milk is sour. We put them out to pasture, which is like in Washington, D.C. or New Orleans or somewhere, and they're not very good.
Well, another question we have to ask ourselves is, if Justin Jefferson was on the Pittsburgh Steelers, would he not be doing the same thing?
Yeah, he would.
Because this offense has sucked for 4 years, and these receivers are getting frustrated. Justin Jefferson would be just like George Pickens right now. I guarantee you. He'd be pissed off.
Nobody's an asshole when they're catching a bazillion passes a year. And even Antonio Brown looked like a star pupil.
Exactly.
And we all talked back then about what a hard worker he was and how dedicated he was. And sure, he's a little quirky, but isn't he a great guy? And then when the offense started to fall apart, we saw a different side of Brown.
If you want these diva receivers on this team, you're going to have to fix the offense. Because if you bring them in super talented and they're not getting balls, this is what you're going to get. So it's a deeper thing than just drafting the wide receivers. You got to fix this offense. Because she's right. When Ben Roethlisberger was slinging the ball all over the field, Antonio Brown wasn't complaining. He was fine. And so were all the other guys. Yeah. But once Ben declined a little bit and they started having feuds and this offense steadily declined, that's when all of a sudden all these guys have problems.
Worse.
Yep.
All those.
Relic's got a good comment if we could put that up.
The one about Chase Claypool?
Yeah. Look, I understand, but how long are we going to wait for a veteran leader? Hines Ward is the last veteran leader I remember in the locker room, the wide receiver room.
I actually agree with Relic. I think it'd be great to have one. I don't know who that is and where you find them because we do have some veterans on the team in the wide receiver room, and maybe they aren't that rolled. You know what I mean? Van Jefferson, Mike Williams, maybe that's not their role.
Yeah, but let's be honest. What good veteran wide receiver is going to sign in Pittsburgh?
That's the other thing.
I don't know that I agree with that, but I also think that every kid who's 22 is on all of these social media platforms for the most part. And I think that that's impossible to avoid. I think what you have to do as a league is work with these kids to manage expectations, do you know what I mean, in real life and notoriety and fame and money. And, you got a lot of them out there making really poor choices. The kid from Las Vegas that wrecked his car, you've got all kinds of bad choices that are going on. So I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe if they.
Do we draft wide receivers well anymore? I mean, we draft them and we use but longevity has to have something to do with whether a draft pick is good or not at some point. So we're drafting good and like we're sprinting in drafts, but we used to be able to have guys that were good that would take over for the guy that was there before. And that's not happening anymore. And the veteran receivers were bringing in. I mean, even on defense. I mean, you think of Patrick Peterson, did not work the way we thought. The veteran leadership and the influence. Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, were not bringing. At some point, and we're going to get into this later. It's not about the players. It's about the people behind the players and how to do better there. So you have to kind of think about where. That's how I see it, at least. I'm not impressed with recent Steeler wide receiver history.
All right, let's switch off of George Pickens for a minute in the wide receiver group. Was there anything else from today's press conference that you guys felt really compelled you wanted to talk about prior to moving on to our New Year's resolution bit?
I just thought it was funny that Tomlin spent about 15 minutes on the Bengals defense and how good they were. And I'm like, Mike, buddy, have you really watching this?
Every year he does like more praising of the other team. It's almost like I don't want to talk to Brooke Pryor. God, what else can I say about the Bengals?
Yeah.
It praises how good they are.
I mean, you could spend 20 minutes on their offense and I'm fine with it, but the Bengals defense, I mean, come on. Oh, they turn the ball over and they sack a lot. I'm like, I just thought that was kind of funny.
Very
the worst defense in the league.
About other teams. Like I listen to other press conferences for articles and stuff, and I don't ever hear any other head coach, go on and on and on. Like they'll get asked like, well, how are you going to plan for TJ Watt or something like that? And they'll talk about how good he is. But the majority of the other coaches aren't out there going on and on about us or any other team, at least not that I hear. I'm sure some of them do.
I think that's not all of them, but I think that guys, the veterans have been around a long time. Harbaugh doesn't get in his press conference and trash the Steelers. He talks about how good they are because he knows if he gets in the press conference and trashes them, then, it's coach speak. I mean, it's just kind of the way it is. Guys like Dan Campbell have gotten away from coach speak a little bit, but I think most of them are still, they know what happens. Yeah.
But, the only other ones were Belichick's because I'm here in New England, and that's a treat. If you've ever heard his, he would not answer a single question. He would not talk to the media. He would he would stonewall them. It was actually kind of entertaining after a while because he'd go out of his way just to not answer.
He was a not fan, but like as a fan, like they lose their minds over that stuff. I mean, Steeler fans are already frustrated at the way Tomlin talks around corners about everything. So can you imagine if they just like refused to, if he just did Belichick and just refused to answer? I mean, they would be reading so much into the silence.
If he was like, we're on to Cincinnati, we're on to. If he pulled a Belichick specifically for this week, we're on to Cincinnati. We would be furious.
He does it. He just does it in his own way with the word salad and the all the Tomlinisms and everything. He doesn't answer anything either. He's just going around in circles. He's just much more personality than Belichick cared to.
Maybe it's the curmudgeon in me, but the press conferences I really miss are Bill Parcells.
Are not what?
Bill Parcells. I miss the Bill Parcells. You think Bill Belichick it was rough? Go back and watch some old Parcells press conferences.
All right, let's roll into our New Year's resolutions for the Steelers this year. Dave, why don't you start us off? What was your first one?
Let me look at my notes real quick because I already forgot. We got so deep into this thing. I got a New Year's resolution from Mr. Tomlin. Please hire some new coordinators. Hire better coordinators. Do yourself a favor. We hit on this a little earlier, at least I did, in the chat before we got on. There's no new ideas, no new blood that's come through this organization. It's been, hiring from within. And I know Matt Canada was from outside, and Arthur Smith too, but these guys are just, this is what Tomlin wants. This is the same conservative offense. He needs to branch out, get new ideas, find a new coordinator with, a modern offense instead of this, conservative run the ball defense. I love Mike Tomlin. I think he'd be a great coach if he just had someone he could lean on, both on offense and defense, to become innovative, do something different. Imagine Mike Tomlin with a bright young offensive coordinator, like a young Sean McVay or something. What would that look like? We'd be counting Super Bowls, but instead it's the same old drag us through the mud with Arthur Smith and Matt Canada, and it's just, Mike, This is your New Year's resolution next year. Get some new coordinators in this building.
Which both are under contract, so.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to be positive.
Yeah, hey, it's a resolution for a reason.
Yep, I'm because the options are either fire another coordinator right afterwards, which makes us look a little Cowboy Raider-ish, or we go into the next season. Most likely, if we carry Arthur Smith, we're probably going to carry one of the two quarterbacks. But a lot is going to carry over into it. So, yeah, I hope the same thing, and I think it would definitely help. The reality of it happening is why.
I know.
I understand why everybody feels that way, and I always try to look at like the positive side to things, and I just don't think it's the time to change. I was surprised that we brought somebody in from the outside with Arthur Smith. So like whether we love him or hate him, I was surprised we brought somebody in from the outside. He hasn't even been there a full year yet. I feel like this season was marked progress over last season, and like, have we really given it like a fair, like enough time to really know? Like, I actually understand some of the criticisms on the defense more than about the offense, because like new coordinator, 2 new quarterbacks. He had to switch quarterbacks, like totally different quarterbacks in the middle of the year. The offensive line is still growing. We don't have a second wide receiver. All of those things, or some of those things, were fixable problems that the team dropped the ball on, but I don't know that that's Arthur Smith's fault. So I kind of think that we need another year, and I know it's going to happen. They're not ever going to get rid of him after this year. He has not floundered nearly. And we had to watch Matt Canada almost drag us to the bottom of the ocean before they were willing to get rid of him. So I know it's not just happening. But
I don't have a problem necessarily with Arthur Smith. It's just it's 2024. Yeah. Do we need 2 tight end, fullback? I
wonder about maybe more like positional coaches. Like, I don't know how much that clashes like with his philosophy, but if you could get something a little bit more innovative for some of the like positional, the line coach, maybe, I don't know, because he's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Unless he gets a job, but I don't know.
I think Pat Meyer's contract is up, so it is possible that might happen. Bottom line is Steelers do not get rid of coaches until they fulfill their contracts for some reason, unless your name is Matt Canada.
Right.
You have to be epically bad.
The 40s they fired. I mean,
and it took a lot. We had to have people chanting on McAfee, regardless, and like Utah and random places, it was fire Canada. That's what it took. And we are not anywhere close to that. We have had we've scored 44 points in us. So
I heard they were about to lose the locker room.
This is where we are. So
they were about to lose the locker room. The offensive guys.
They had to be.
I heard Deontay Johnson and George Pickens and the wide receivers were about to mutiny.
And they should have been. They had every right to be that angry.
100%.
I don't Diva stuff. This was like legitimately.
Part of being a head coach is identifying weaknesses and fixing them. You had enough time to see that Matt Canada was terrible. You had enough time.
So after last week, isn't the defense on the precipice of a revolt? I mean, because not only are they calling out the mystery player, there was some Patrick Queen talk about nobody is holding this player accountable, whoever he may be, Cam Sutton. But I mean, that's what I don't understand. That's why from a New Year's resolution standpoint, I kind of broke it down into the immediate and then a short term and a long term. Immediate, play like you have nothing to lose, and seize the moment. There's still a chance. There's still a chance here. We're probably not going to get the division. I think Baltimore's now favored by 8 touchdowns. I'll be picking the Browns in the points, by the way, just to let you know. But at this point, okay, go out. It's going to be a shootout with the Bengals. I'm sorry. The defense, when they were all together, gave up 38 points a couple of weeks ago. Who knows how much they're going to give up? As long as we score one more point, that's great. We roll into Houston. If we win, we roll into Houston. We can beat Houston, although they boat raced us last time we played us. Mike Tomlin's 0-2 in Houston for his career, but we can beat Houston. And then you flip a coin. Honestly, I almost kind of hope we lose to the Bengals for them to get in as the 7th seed. because they will beat Buffalo, and then we don't have to worry about them. And I feel good about anybody but Buffalo in the AFC playoffs. But seize the moment, play like you lay it all on the line. This whole pointing fingers and confusion stuff, I don't care. You want to play hero ball? All 11 of you play hero ball and figure it out. Win the freaking games. That's my resolution is win. Just win.
Apparently, everybody would like to see Cordarrelle Patterson go away as part of their New Year's resolution. Relic says the only way we let Arthur Smith come back is by him writing down "Stop using Cordarrelle Patterson" on first down. And then right behind him, David comes in and says Warren is a starter. Najee's the ground and pound guy in the second half with the lead, and C-Pat becomes Arthur Smith's assistant. Like, man, I don't know if he can hold a clipboard. Relic also says at least we don't have Kenny sack himself Pickens anymore, and that's a big start.
Really.
Yeah, well,
There's no place to go but up from last year. There's no
Big
place to go
Poppy
but up.
said we need Arthur Smith's 2 tight ends to help with line support and lack of wide receivers.
Necessity.
And that's a good point. I mean,
And you're
they did drop the ball.
wrong.
And,
Not
you're
wrong.
preaching to the choir on that one, buddy.
Yeah, not wrong. I will say one of my resolutions was really to continue this concept of building in the trenches. I was really reflecting back on this season and how happy I am we have Andy Weidel in Pittsburgh now, and looking at the things that Philadelphia has done so well that they can put Kenny Pickett in and he can perform admirably because what's around him is so strong. And a big part of that is the offensive line. And Pickett definitely didn't have that in Pittsburgh. But let's say the reality is in the NFL, you have to be able to play sometimes when that line breaks down, and he couldn't. So I think that we're definitely in a good start with that. And we had some unfortunate injuries this year, which I think made it hard for us to really visualize exactly what that would have looked like if all of those guys had been healthy. But to think about next year and getting those guys back and being a little bit healthier, maybe turning Weidel's focus to the defense and the defensive line, I think all of that stuff is huge. And I think that that's going to continue to help. So that's mine, is to continue to build in the trenches. Zach,
That's
what
a great
about
point, because before I get to mine, I'll touch on yours, Rue, with just one note. I think we forget because we our job is to look at things in an unbiased way and reflect back. We kind of shrugged it off because it wouldn't be an excuse, but we lost 3 starting offensive linemen to injury. Starting, like, not just we as like the pundits, to the extent we're just like, that's not an excuse. We can't bring that up. But there's a reality that affects the game plan, all that. So that's a great point, that we're going to get some guys back that are healthy, but that to the extent that did impact our plan to build back in the trenches, Andy Weidel's probably like, I did my job. Well, I don't know what else I can do. But my resolution ties into what we were talking about before with the coordinators, right? And this is New Year's kitty. Yeah, there's a lot of kitties that you'll see come through. We have 6. But there's a theme that I have with some of these, and this one is with the coordinators. It feels like we have 3 separate approaches to the 3 phases of the game. We have our special teams approach, we have our offensive approach, and our defensive approach, and not a team approach. And with the Chiefs or with the Eagles or with you see a team approach. You see this working with this. We're doing this on defense, so that we're not acting like a unit as a team. And I don't know what kind of communication is going on. From what we heard in Arthur Smith in the preseason, apparently there's supposed to be better communication this season, which there might be. But between coordinators, I'm not feeling it. I don't know if I'm not seeing the X's and O's to prove me wrong. And if someone is seeing that kind of cohesion that I'm not, let me know. But that is really affecting us, because we're like, Danny Smith is great or all that, but we're not. I don't remember the last time I'm like, that was a good overall team game. Good job, all 3. So that was my thing. I'd like to see that change going forward. I don't know what needs to happen to change it, but coordinator and coaching wise, I want better communication.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel at least.
I will say for my after the season ends, hopefully with at least one playoff victory, my number 1 priority is for the Steelers to sign T. Higgins. They can't afford him in Cincinnati. They're going to pay Jamar Chase. They should pay Jamar Chase. T. Higgins is great. Sign him. Don't care what it costs. Sign him. Then I want you to draft the corner out of East Carolina, Chevelle. He's 6'3", and he would instantly be the fastest guy in the defense. He's a monster. He's a Mel Blount type. You put him and then make Joey Porter your CB, one for next year, eventually the CB2. You got Dante Jackson slides to the slot. That's a huge upgrade. Also, the kid from Kentucky, the defensive lineman. You can get him in the second round. We need defensive line help. Ogunjobi is starting to look washed. Cam can't play forever. He's had a great year, but, I mean, let's face it, he's going to be old next year. You know, maybe he'll be Calais Campbell. Maybe he won't. I like Keanu Benton. We don't play a two-man line. We need a three-man line. So go fix the secondary, the defensive line, and sign a bona fide number one wide receiver. Pickens walks in the offseason, demands a trade. Even if he comes back and plays out his contract, now you've got a bona fide number one for 5 years with whoever ends up playing quarterback.
David brings up that when Porter is back, that we should give Trice a shot in the slot. Against the Chiefs, Trice was the highest rated secondary guy with a grade of 83.9. The film doesn't lie.
Great game. He had a great game.
144 quarterbacks that have played 80-plus coverage snaps this season. Trice Jr. ranks number one in coverage grade per PFF. I honestly think he would be the better choice over Bishop or Sutton. I think that's
he loves himself some Corey Trice, man.
I don't blame him.
The problem again is he's banged up again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not serious, but this guy, he's an injury just waiting to happen. It'd be a miracle if he makes it to the playoffs, honestly.
It's interesting to see him. I would say if he really is a little bit banged up and you don't need him this week, I mean, I think he has to leverage his snaps. I wouldn't play him. I would save him for the playoffs, you know, especially with as volatile as JPJ can be at times.
On that point, if Baltimore wins, do you rest some starters for this game? Does it matter at that point? I would.
They will not.
He won't.
He won't.
You're right.
He said he won't.
You're right.
But
he won't.
I
He said
would.
he
said
said
he's not even thinking about that.
yeah, but he did say he would think about it later in the week. But
he's not going to.
He's not going to. You're right.
They do have to win to guarantee themselves to play the Texans, because if the Chargers win, and it's likely they will, they're 11-6. You finish 10-7. Yeah, you're the 6th seed. We're going to Baltimore.
Yeah, I think that there's some validity to that. I agree. I think you're playing for your seating and your spot right now and who your potential opponent is. And yeah, I mean,
I do agree with Tomlin. You don't want to go in four losses in a row. You want to.
I was gonna say, don't you have to want to go in, give it all to get like your swagger back or whatever you want to call it, you know, before you go into play in the playoffs? 4 losses in a row would be pretty low. I saw Yenzer down south dropped in here that we need to retain Russ and Fields if possible. I would love that. I don't know that that's realistic. One of my resolutions is definitely to retain Russ. I think we need to come up with some kind of an offer for him that's reasonable and realistic, that's not offensive to him, but that is not breaking the bank for us, that makes sense for both parties. I can't imagine he wants to leave, because where is he going to go? This is his best shot at another Super Bowl, I think, hands down. Any of the other teams that are Super Bowl ready or as close to the Super Bowl as we are don't have the pieces we have. I don't see him wanting to leave and start somewhere else. Unless you just won't pay him anything.
Yeah, but at this point, you know, when it was 6-1, we were all on the Russ train. 6-4, the Russ train's starting to slow down a little bit. The steam engine is losing steam quickly. He's been very turnover prone. We have started to see what people saw the last year in Seattle, what people saw the 2 years in Denver. He's holding the ball. He's either check down or throw it deep. There is no intermediate pass. So you have to start looking at, is the 37-year-old version of Russell Wilson going to be better than the 36-year-old Russell Wilson? I don't think so.
It's a legitimate concern.
It's a concern, but out of context, I 100% agree with you. With context, we are getting one of the worst pass protections. And again, against all those 3 teams, it was terrible. I don't care what quarterback you have outside of maybe healthy Patrick Mahomes. You're not doing anything with the kind of protection we were giving Russ. So I don't care what kind of game plan you put in there. And when I say save your Russ, I've used that term before. I'm not. What I mean is, when Russell Wilson feels like he has to win a game for you, he's at his absolute worst. And And the lack of an offensive line protection, the lack of a consistent running game, and a defense
Lack
that
of
works
targets.
are the three
Mhm.
things Russell
That's the
Wilson
big
needs
one.
to succeed. Those are
Well,
the three,
if-
and he hasn't got any of those. So while Russell Wilson is a concern, I agree with Mark Caboli where he said Russell Wilson is a problem, but in the Steelers, he's the 13th problem.
Agreed
Yeah.
with that.
So he
But-
is
yeah.
a problem, but it's not.
I kinda agree
the
with that,
main
too.
one.
But you don't retain that problem. And here's the thing:
Then who?
the arguments you're making,
Who's better?
the same arguments from Denver and Seattle. He's progressively gotten worse. He's fallen off the table. Look, he's not Tom Brady. He's not going to play till he's 45 and be good. He's not. He's an undersized quarterback who is starting to mirror the end process of Drew Brees.
I'll say this: if he plays that same way with a healthy offensive line, with George Pickens and another guy behind him and a healthy defense, if we see that Russell Wilson, I will agree with you, because Russell Wilson, to me, at this point, cannot win games on his own. He needs the guys around him to make him not have to win the game. I
but
want
we
a
don't have
game
those
manager,
guys.
Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
No,
but the
that's
point
the thing.
Leanne
So
makes
we're
is
not gonna
right.
get the-
Then who? Because there's no free agent quarterbacks. There's no one in the draft. I think you have to bring him back
I
for
think
like a
every
2-year
need to
deal.
No,
throw
you
out
go with,
the
you go with
things that are
Fields and just whatever
ridiculous.
happens next year.
Then, but why? Why have you? If that's going to happen, then
Because
why
Fields
not
is
keep him?
25 and he's the best possible
Okay, all right,
quarterback
all
you
right,
can get.
all right. I'm done.
I don't know if Fields is better than. I wanted Fields to win the
He's
job.
better than every quarterback in the draft. Every single
Probably.
one.
Well,
That's not hard. I might be better
Yeah,
than every quarterback in the draft.
Cam Ward intrigues me, but you might be right about the rest of them.
Relic brings up a question for the panel. What happens? It won't happen. He qualifies, but what happens if Ashton Janty falls to 25? I think that's how you say his
We're not
last
going to do
name.
this again.
Do we-
Right? We're not going to do this
Do we
again.
draft him to
Yeah,
tag
no,
him
well-
with Warren? And I'm just telling Relic, look, we're going to kick you off the show.
We'll talk.
We can't
about
do
this when
running
we
back.
get closer to
Carter's
the draft.
excited though. Says Jamie was robbed of the Heisman. Robbed.
Well,
Genty's a
we'll
good back.
yeah.
And listen, but you can't,
We can't.
there's a
do
million
it.
problems
We
on this
can do
team.
all
Running
day.
back is
I agree
1
with you.
million.
There's a million
on the-
people.
And let's see what happens with Najee first. Let's see if we franchise tag him. Let's see. It might be a null point. I need to see what happens with all of that. I'm hoping we franchise tag him, and even if we get a grumpy Najee, we get a Najee. That's what I'm hoping. I'm
It's supposed to be a
selfish.
deep running
Horribly
back draft, so
selfish.
you can get one in the
Yeah.
third, fourth round. That's good. You don't have to draft Genty,
That's a good
please.
point.
Yeah. And likelihood is, unless Najee has some huge game in the playoffs. I mean, you kind of seen where it's going with that. I mean, the distribution of labor. Warren is at this point the lead back. He's been the last 2-3 games, and I think he's healthy now, and they're gearing up for life without him.
Now
And I
that,
think-
we'll get into the X's and O's of that, but if the same distribution happens with an offensive line that knows how to block with a defense that knows a run is coming, I'll agree. The whole X's and O's of the Najee Warren situation frustrate me because there's snapshots and there's the overall view, but that could be an entire show in itself.
Yeah, but it's been the same
but-
line all year. I mean, he had 3 good games. He had 3 really good games in the middle of the season. It's been the same line all year. Same thing with Russell Wilson. It's the same line that was blocking for Justin Fields at the beginning of the year. If you hold the ball, and Justin Fields holds the ball too long too. Don't get it twisted. Justin Fields holds the ball. The only difference is Justin Fields can kind of run away from the sacks, and Russ can't run away from him anymore. He tries. He tries to run away. He's had some nice moments here and there, but that's why you got to look at it. This offensive line is going to change next year. Fatano's going to be healthy next year. You think they're going to go draft another tackle? I mean, come on. The line is the line.
No.
It's going to be this way next year.
They should be better.
They
with more
should
experience.
be, but they should have
Should be
been better
healthy
this
again.
year.
But they have injuries that they weren't accounting for. They would have been better, you would assume, without the injuries to Fatanu and Daniels.
Well,
Yeah.
Daniels was on his way out anyway because they're not going to
But he was
re-sign him.
still here, and we hadn't planned to replace him because he was here and he's the known quantity that he is. And then, and frankly, one who's been very available. Do you know what I mean? Not somebody who's routinely hurt, and then he's hurt and he's out. You're not, you can't. I don't know. You can't.
He had a
plan for
3-year
every
contract. He missed the 3rd year of his contract. They weren't going to re-sign him anyway. That's why they
Okay, all right.
drafted McCormick.
Yeah, but if he played, I mean, he was
Legit.
He was playing
Probably
well.
would have been better than McCormick.
But honestly,
that's
what is a
the
guard
difference.
in this offense? What good does a guard do you? They don't run
Well, no,
into guards.
it's not what good does the guard do you. It's what happens badly if the guard plays badly. That's
Right.
and Mason McCormick has hit a rookie wall that James Daniels would not have hit. We lost veteran presence on the line that now is all on Seumalo. If you look at the guys around him,
He doesn't talk.
Seumalo's babysitting.
Yeah.
That is what is happening right now, and that has to be so. There's a lot, but that's a whole other thing. So but let's pivot back really quick.
Zach, what is your next resolution? Let's hear it.
And the theme that I'm going on about the disjointedness, I want this defense to play like I asked the coordinators to coach. Like, I want to see a unit. I understand that there's guys that want to point fingers. I really understand that, but I want to see a defensive unit, not 11 guys. I don't. Well, the throw it all to the wall and the hero ball and everyone, that might work to a point, but this defense, because of Terrell Austin's shortcomings, needs that communication to go well, and hero ball doesn't work well with communication. So I just play like a unit. Play like you have veteran guys on your team that know how to hold other people accountable. So, David.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to laugh while you were talking, but that was a good one. That was a good one.
Myself
Yeah,
up.
hey, and by the way, Big Poppy, what does in this offense? Look, I am not saying guards aren't important, but I'm saying in this offense, what do we do all the time? What do we rail about week after week after week after week on the running game? They toss the ball to the outside.
Oh, you just stole my next resolution.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, it wasn't a steal. It was a segue for you.
There you go. Segue.
New Year's resolution for Arthur Smith: no more tosses to Najee, please, for the love of God. And listen, I like Najee. I think he's a good running back, but that's not his strength.
It's not.
And I don't know. I watched it last night. Who was Bijan Robinson? That's a guy you want to throw pitches to, not Najee Harris. It's mind-boggling.
Warren.
I have to say, Najee's held himself together remarkably well for a running back that I feel has been used
horribly, misused terribly.
Time in Pittsburgh.
They've run him into
the ground. The fact that he got 1,000 yards with the amount of toss plays we've got, I think still to this point, I think you can count the amount of fully successful toss plays on one hand. At least going through my head. Yes, I will agree with you. Like it's not a strong suit.
Yeah,
so Dave, I absolutely agree with you, but I don't know how much Arthur Smith is willing to adjust in season. I haven't seen Arthur Smith being a master of adjustment in general. So maybe he just doesn't adjust midseason. Like the Steelers don't negotiate. Arthur Smith doesn't adjust. So I don't know what it is, but I kind of feel like we're kind of stuck with the toss play, and I'm just going to be mad about it like 6 times a game. I've accepted that, but I'm going to accept to be mad.
Yeah, we should just all accept it. Stop.
And hope that one of them is to war and it works.
Yeah, our good friend Big Poppy said pulling guards is a thing. You're right. It absolutely is in the rest of the NFL. Not Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
used to be.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I wonder. Well, I don't know. James Daniels a good pulling guard. Does any? I don't know the stats on this because if
I don't think that's.
It's much funnier when he's going and typing.
I know he's got
here on the show. You're much.
It's the cough syrup. It's the cough syrup that's getting him.
he's all drugged up, sitting at home.
He's all high on NyQuil up there.
There's 2 of each of us.
He's not like, what is it, like the purple drink at home?
I like that one.
All right, Bob. What's your next one?
So this is kind of my long-term resolution. All right, look. The Chief handed it to Dan Rooney when he was early 70s. Dan Rooney handed it to Art Rooney when he was 71. Art's 73. It's time, man. Daniel Martin Rooney is ready. Even if he's not, he can hardly do worse at this point. The Steelers' ownership at this point under Art Rooney is happy being on the screen in the hunt. They're happy doing that. Mike Tomlin, for all the bullshit about the no losing seasons, there is one very impressive stat from Mike Tomlin. In his entire career, he has only coached one game where he was mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. If they highlighted that instead of the bullshit losing season thing, I think more Steeler fans would not get as upset about the no losing seasons thing. But something changed in the early 2010s where being on the screen, being in the hunt, kind of became enough for Art. And he's been let's face it, Dan Rooney made Chuck Noll fire all his coaches. He wanted to run him out of town. He brought Bill Cowher into his office and said, "You don't tell me how to spend my money." Dan Rooney ran the Steeler dynasty from the 70s and he kind of put together the rest of it for Art. We need a Dan Rooney at this point. The only one we got is Daniel Martin Rooney, so we got to hope he's like his grandfather. It's time. It's time for the ownership to change. Not because Art's a bad guy. He's old. He's 73. We just all know what happened in the country where we don't want old people running the country anymore. Let's stop having old people run the Steelers. We need fresh thinking. We need someone to actually sit down across from Mike Tomlin and say, Mike, you're still young. Start thinking like a young guy. Go hire a young coordinator and make things happen. Art Rooney's going to let him do what he wants to do. I'm not saying that Dan Rooney would come in and fire Tomlin right away, but I think he would tell him, hey, we're going to change. We're going to change. We're not just going to say we're going to change. We're going to change. And that's what we need. Because at this point, whether you like it or not, we are Cleveland. We haven't been relevant in 10 years.
Oh, I don't know if I go that far, Bob. Oof.
Wow.
You're going to have all of Pittsburgh chasing after you. We are Cleveland. Jesus Christ. Everybody duck. They're coming after Bob.
Feel dirty after that. Now, it does kind of fit in. I was talking to my wife about if I had to summarize my resolutions and my kind of view on it. I'm like, what's a pithy way I could summarize? You came up with a great way. And actually, we might not have all agreed on this particular episode. One thing that did lead into was the resolve to evolve. Is how I would put that. It's a willingness to know where you are, know what you need, and know where you need to go. And what that entails, I don't know, because we've learned from the podcast that I am terrible in being front office. I should be kept as far away from a front office as possible. But the resolve to evolve is, I think that's important for me personally, but for the Steelers as well. So because my personal resolution that I made, I decided to have a personal one as well. Is I after the Chiefs loss, I stepped away from football for a bit, and I don't often do that. But I just needed a palate cleanser. And so I watched a bunch of TV, I played a bunch of video games. And when I came back, what I was thinking of was the 2005 season. And not the historical, run to the playoffs, how I felt before that 4-run winning streak that got us into the playoffs. How did I feel in that moment? And I remember all I was thinking of is, here we go again. Bill Cowher's going to let it. Bill Cowher's going to have a season that another AFC championship loss. And I was mad. I was against Cowher. My resolution to myself is keep perspective on how I react mid-season, simply because I remember how I reacted mid-season to that one. And that's important to me because you can't take a lot of things back. And I'm going to sound like an old guy on a porch. On this modern day where technology and all that is, everything is saved. I don't want to say something that I'm going to say later, like with Cameron Hayward. I had to spend the first half of the season apologizing for what I said to him in the preseason because I reacted in the moment. And I'm trying to hold myself accountable and keep perspective because I don't know how it's going to look at the end of the season. I could feel stupid right now, or I could be on the button. I don't know, but perspective matters. That's my personal one. So not for everyone, not for every Steelers fan. Everyone adjusts their own way, but for me, that's how I'm going to make sure that I don't have a cardiac arrest.
I have one last resolution. After seeing what Russell Wilson bought all of his offensive linemen for Christmas gifts, I'm hoping that we can get him to buy welcome to the 2025 season gifts for all the officials so that maybe things start going our way next season just a little bit. I mean, maybe we get them like a Louis Vuitton bag, some Airbnb credits. Maybe they'll be a little bit nicer to us, hold on to their own laundry a little bit.
I like that.
That's anything else? Any other resolutions? Did we miss anything?
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to bring up here was this Charlotte quote. Mm-hmm. So it's not that the mindsets don't change. Fans and and people who covered the team have changed. The Steelers haven't changed. And for a long time that worked, but it hasn't worked for a decade. And there's nothing that says that football is going to regress to a physical defensive running game is going to work. It's just not. It's not that we suck. It's that we won't change. And that's the problem. That's why so many fans are frustrated. And for those of us who've been in the Steeler fan base since the 70s, trust me, this has been the way it's been for 50 plus years in Pittsburgh. They either love a championship team or tear it all down, start all over. I mean, in the 90s with Cowher, everybody wanted Cowher gone because he kept losing AFC championship games, and God forbid he lost his Super Bowl. In the 80s, we all wanted to get rid of Noel. It's just the way it is. Bottom line is we've had 7 losing seasons in 54 years. That's great. But in Pittsburgh, if you're not holding the Lombardi, you're not holding anything.
I think Charlotte's point is more to the negativity. But David had some other resolutions before we get off. I didn't realize he was still cough syrup-induced frenzy. He said, more Peyton Wilson, 5th on the team in tackles to Roberts, 44, which is 9th, and that's after having less snaps first half of the season, plus an INT, 2 fumble recoveries, and a fumble return for a touchdown. He's having a huge season. And then he had a number 6. I mean, he did like a whole list. We all did like 3. David's got
He should have been on today. He just rolled him out here. Sick or no sick.
Russ starts to struggle because of the pressure. Put Fields in, but don't control him and lock him in a box with play calls. I think that's awesome. Unleash him. Oh, and even if Russ is doing well, let Fields cook in the red zone. Agreed.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yes.
I think we'll see real quick more or less, more or any Fields in Cincinnati in the playoffs.
I'd say none for Cincinnati. He got hurt doing it, so now they're going to be even more careful, I think, and less.
And hold him for the playoffs.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. Okay, I'll say, if Baltimore loses, Baltimore loses now, same feeling, or is it now a little more leave it all in the field and you possibly put him in? I'm just curious if that changed your perspective.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's a good point. If Baltimore loses, you get a chance for the division. Yeah, maybe. You might be right.
Yeah, because the Browns, some teams really hate the fact that they might hold that number 1 pick, and if the Browns lose, they're definitely in the running for that number 1 pick, and I don't think any Browns fans want that. So they're going to be competing. It's an AFC North game. They're gonna compete.
That'd be an interesting question if Dion would let Shedeur Sanders go to the Browns.
No chance.
Oh goodness.
I doubt it. I
no
can't
chance.
see it.
No chance.
Yeah, I can't
Zero.
see that. But I mean, isn't that's the whole point? Is that wherever you go first, it's like the curse and the blessing and the curse. Like you're the first, and you're at the worst team. I mean, I forget who was just talking about that on a podcast the other day. Didn't really understand that was how it worked, and then they were so mad they got drafted somewhere, and then. They got drafted by the Steelers. Forget who that was. And they were mad they got drafted by the Steelers because they wanted to be drafted really early on. And then they were friends with the person who got drafted like 1st or 2nd. And the team was terrible. And they lost like all these games. And he was glad it wasn't him. I forget who that was. All right. Well, if you tuned in and you chimed in with your thoughts and resolutions and your thoughts on our resolutions, we definitely appreciate it. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also find all of us on social media. Our Twitter handles are under our names. Most of us are also on Blue Sky. There's a Steeler Sanctuary podcast page and a Steeler Sanctuary page on Twitter. Give them both a follow. And if you're catching this later after it's already been filmed and it's not live anymore, please leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts on what your Steelers New Year's resolutions are. We would love to hear from you. We will be back on, what's today? Today is Monday. Monday. We will be back on Thursday, right? With the
preview.
Preview game?
And
Hard Knocks too, yeah.
Hard Knocks and preview on Thursday, right?
All right. Yep.
All right, 6:30. We will see you there.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.